Alright guys, so I do hope you guys have enjoyed this project so far. So this video I want to talk about everything that kind of went right and kind of went wrong with this project. And so normally for woodworkers, I wouldn't recommend doing this with most people. When you're presenting this to a client, friends, family, don't go through pointing out your mistakes because most people are not going to notice it. With a piece of furniture this big, or pretty much any piece of furniture, anything you make, just the fact that it's handmade is good enough for most people, let alone, little minor issues here and there are not going to stand out. It's really only to other woodworkers that they're going to notice that kind of stuff. And so the goal of this channel is purely to help you guys learn and to help myself learn. So being able to point out my mistakes and be honest with you guys about stuff that went wrong on here and stuff that went right is a really good, helpful learning tip. So that's all this video is going to be about. It's going to be a very long sitting down rant from myself. There's not going to be a whole lot of interesting stuff. And so that's why I made sure to throw some nice B-roll footage of this thing right at the beginning of the video, just to make sure that if you guys haven't seen that yet, you got to enjoy it. And so to start off, let's talk about where the design of this thing came from. Now, the majority of the design came from this illustrated cabinet maker's book. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a really good book to have. If you want to do any kind of furniture making, this gives you kind of a lot of standard dimensions to work with and just a whole bunch of sample pieces. So there will be a link to this down in the description. Make sure you guys go check it out. But yeah, this pie cupboard is basically the exact replica of the jelly cupboard out of this book. I just called it a pie cupboard because that sounds better. And I don't really know what jelly is. I think that's an American term. And so there's a few things on here where I went through and changed the design from what's in the book. Mainly the breadboard end top is one of them because I really like the look of breadboard ends. I think they just bring a piece together a little bit better than just a normal flat top. The French Canadian style doors, it does show that in the book, but they're a little bit different style. I wanted to put the glass in here, which is where I changed the design. And the biggest change from what's in the book compared to what I actually built here is these front corners. So what I ended up doing in the front corners, as you guys saw, was bevel them to get a nice seamless corner. So the grain nicely wraps around here. What it shows in the book to do is to just build the same thing we built and then just tack a face frame onto the front edge. Now, I didn't really like that idea because then you get a lot of weird grain, and the side of your cabinet doesn't look very good, so I didn't want to do that. And so I really like the idea of, this beveled corner that then creates this just beautifully seamless joint. It's a really strong joint because it's a long grain to long grain connection, so it's pretty much a bulletproof joint, and it's pretty much as strong as, or stronger than just solid wood itself. So it's a really good way of working, and it's a technique that I'm definitely going to utilize on way more projects because it's just such a good way to get a nice frame design without having to go with something like 8/4 stock, which then takes up a lot of internal space. We've got all this excess space on the inside where those legs are still hollow to fill up with stuff. And so moving from something that went really well to something that went really wrong. That was my wood choice. So when I say wood choice, I don't mean the combination of walnut and white oak. This is by far my favorite combination. It tops cherry and walnut. I love the look of white oak mixed with walnut panels. I just think it looks so very good. But what I don't like is the pieces of white oak I chose. Mainly this piece right here, right? This front corner just annoys me so much. And so there's a few different reasons I don't like that front right corner. Mainly, it's just all these heavy cathedral grains. I don't really like the look of them. Now, I do think that they blended in pretty well, but I just don't like the look of it personally. Now again, talking to my family and everything I've shown them this on social media, people seem to really not mind it. It's just a generally not noticeable thing to most people. But again, it's one of those things as a woodworker, I know that if I just chosen a different piece of wood for that spot, it would have made it look better. It would have made the front look more consistent because pretty much everywhere else on the frame, we have fairly good, clean, straight grain. It's just that one vertical there where the grain has all those cathedral shapes to it, and I'm just not really a fan of it. Also, that piece has randomly started to turn gray. So basically from here upwards, the wood has started going a light gray color, which is just kind of off-putting in my opinion. Again, apparently it's not really a noticeable thing to most people, but it's something that I notice and kind of annoys me. And so one of the worst things about a project like this is that it takes place over a long period of time. This project took me about a month and a half to complete, and over that time, as a woodworker, you're still constantly learning. Every moment you have, whether you're in the shop or you're just Googling some stuff on your computer, you're constantly learning about how to improve your craft. And so one of the things I learned while working on this project was when I went to pick up the mortiser, the guy that I bought it from, he told me about this place here in Calgary that sold that had pretty good prices on wood. So when I emailed that company to get their price list for their lumber, I found out that they sold normal plain sawn white oak, quarter sawn white oak and wrist sawn white oak. And so what's really annoying about that is if I'd known that beforehand, I would have tried to get some wrist sawn white oak for my front pieces, my doors. Mainly because wrist sawn white oak, if you don't know what that means, it's basically very good clean straight grain. Now anytime you're cutting and you're getting through the straight grain sections of white oak, you're going to get a lot of reflex. But when you wrist saw white oak, what you end up getting is very clean straight grains with minimal reflex. Now personally, I'm someone who does not like reflex very much. I try to avoid them if I can. It's one of those things with white oak that you either love it or you hate it, but I'm personally not a fan of the reflex that are in quarter sawn white oak. But wrist sawn white oak would have made a big difference in this project. And again, going back to my lumber choices, again, you can find good clean straight grain sections of boards, of most boards, but then if you just try to do that, you end up with a lot of excess and it's kind of wasteful. Whereas if you can just buy wrist sawn wood, it does cost a little bit more money, but you can get more useful pieces out of it. And so where I really would have loved to use wrist sawn wood is in this vertical, like we already talked about, but also in the doors. Because again, in the doors, this vertical on this door has a lot of that cathedral grain. Same with this top section here and this section here. Those would be much better looking if they were wrist sawn white oak. And so finally, to talk about wood, the most annoying thing by far is these walnut panels. Now, they don't look bad on camera, and again, to most people, they don't look bad either. It's only something that I've personally noticed. And so I bought the walnut for these panels from a different place than I bought the walnut for the side panels. And so what I think the difference is, as best as I can tell, is that these panels are steamed walnut, whereas the ones on the other side are just kiln dried walnut. And so the steamed walnut seems to be staying a little bit fuzzy. Now I sanded all these panels up to, I think I went up to 320 grit, just trying to get rid of this weird fuzz, but it still ends up being there. No matter what I do, I can't get rid of the fuzziness of this walnut. And so it seems like it's starting to go away, especially as the finish starts to cure. It seems like it's holding down that fuzz and kind of reducing it. But what happens if you brush it in the wrong way, you get all this really gray, fuzzy look to it that I just don't personally like. So I know in the future to avoid this one place that I was buying wood from because, well, it's more expensive anyway, but it was just kind of a last-ditch effort because everyone else was out. And so those are kind of the big things. Again, when you're making a project like this is something that I could easily sell for upwards of $3,000. That would be a going good asking price for a piece like this, just because of everything that goes into it. And so when you're making a piece like this, you have to keep that in your mind that if you ever want to sell it, this is going to be an expensive piece of furniture. So cheaping out on your wood, choosing to just use up whatever pieces you have rather than properly selecting good pieces of wood is just going to be, it's just going to hurt you down the road because you're going to get areas like these that just don't seem like they fit. And so one of the biggest lessons to learn from this is just when you're choosing your wood, when you're picking out your pieces that are going to go into your furniture, especially anything on the front face, take your time, pick the absolute best quality stuff you can because it's going to make a huge difference in the long run. And so next up is the glass that's in the doors here. So this is my first time ever putting glass into a project. I was very afraid of working with glass. I always thought it was something that was going to break very easily, but I've kind of learned differently since starting to do this project. And so for this project, I decided to just go for glass. And the glass is awesome. The only downside is I didn't do enough learning before I just jumped in and did it. And so the glass is just held in here with clear silicone, which now that it's cured up, it doesn't look horrible. The only downside is that just kind of the whole inside doesn't look spectacular. And so when I was doing research while I was waiting for the silicone to cure, because I didn't think it was actually going to work, I found a very easy way to hold glass in without the need for the messiness of silicone. Because silicone, if you do it right, it works fine. But if you do it wrong, like I did, and I ended up having to redo one of these windows, which was a real pain in the butt. I ended up having to cut it out, remove all the silicone, which was an absolute nightmare. If you do it wrong, it can make an absolute mess. Whereas the way that I found that I'm going to do it again in the future is to just put some battens in and then pin them in with a pin nailer, a 23 gauge pin nailer. So I've gone out, I've bought a pin nailer, and on any other projects I do in the future, I'm going to make sure to do it the proper way with just lining the inside of the rabbet here with a piece of wood to hold the glass in, and that's what holds it in. You put a small bead of silicone along the edge here, that will stop the window from rattling around, but the main holding force is not from the silicone, it's mainly from those battens you're putting into the backside and holding in with those 23 gauge nails. So that's a much better way to work. Again, it's something that I learned while I was trying to figure out other ways to hold this glass in, because I didn't think that my silicone idea was going to work. And so also with the doors, I didn't take enough time to properly get them fitted and to pay attention to really what I was doing. Now, they don't look bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's only to, again, me that I noticed a small gap above this door here that I don't really like it because they look uneven. But the problem that, and the reason that gap showed up is because when I put the glass in, it started to kind of sag the door down just by a little bit. And so in the future, when I do doors like this, I'm going to make sure to follow the example of the hinges. So beside the hinges here, between the side piece of the door and the side piece of the actual cupboard here, the hinges force you to leave about a 1/16 of an inch spacing. And so if I left that 1/16 inch gap everywhere else here, there would be no issues. All the doors would fit up just fine. There literally would be no issue. And so I managed to get this door fitting up nicely, but again, we still have that small gap along the top edge here. But now the doors both move freely, they both sit very nicely in here. There's absolutely no issue now that I've got everything fitted up and working well. And so if I'd paid a little bit more attention to what I was doing when I was actually fitting up doors, I just would have prevented me having to have that terrifying moment of running a door with glass in it through my table saw. Other than that, everything else really went well on here. Now, obviously, if we go and look on the inside, the ammonia fume shelves, that was honestly a very pointless effort. It didn't work at all. So now I didn't mention in that video because it did seem like it kind of worked, but looking at it now with finish all over the entire piece, I realized that the ammonia fuming really didn't do anything. And so to end this video on a positive note, let's talk about some more of the positive things about this project. Again, one of my favorite things about this is the drawers. I think that they just came out so beautifully. Using that curly birch in the base of them made a massive difference. Like, I love just the brightness of the inside of these drawers. It really makes a huge difference. Even, I didn't think it made that much of a difference when I had it in the garage, but as soon as I brought it in the house and you're in a slightly darker corner and you open this up, it just seems like a much larger, brighter drawer because we have a nice light wood at the base here. And while the curly birch is just beautiful anyway. One of the other things I really love about this thing is the hardware. Now, for the hinges on the door, we went with Horton Brass's cabinet hinges, 2-inch tall cabinet hinges, and these things are just so smooth and just so nice. And so I ended up ruining the first set of hinges I installed on here because I didn't know that the dark antiquing that's on these hinges is very easy to rub off. So if you get any oil, even the oil on your fingers if you're holding onto them for too long, but mainly it was the oil that I was putting on the screws to make them cut into the wood easier, that ended up eating away at that dark antique finish. So I ended up just buffing them off, and now I have a really rough pair of brass hinges that I can use for installing on projects. So I'm going to make sure to save those, and I'll just use those as my install hinges. I don't care if they get marked up, I don't care if they get damaged. They're just there for the install portion of the project. Then I can come in afterwards and install the nice ones that lived in the bag for their whole lives onto the final piece so they don't get damaged, which is just a really much better way of working, honestly. And so other than a few small things, I'm overall very happy with this project. It came out absolutely beautiful. It's a beast of a piece of furniture. I literally cannot move it around myself. This is the first piece of furniture I've built that I haven't been able to move myself. So it's kind of a beast, and I'm really happy with it. I love furniture like this that just has a physical presence in a room. It feels like there's just this big thing sitting there because, well, there is. As you can see, sitting down on a chair here, it's actually taller than me. So it's a really big, beautiful piece of furniture, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And so if you guys have any questions, you want to know anything about the design decisions that went into this, feel free to leave a comment down below. You can also find my email on my channel page. You can contact me that way if you'd like to. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you enjoyed this long series and the month or two that it's been. And as always, guys, I will see you in the next video.